My name is Dr. Tim Martin, and one of the co-chairs of the testing task force, and we have met several times this year, and we're happy to have several members here with us live. And I know that we might have some people on the phone with us. If you're on the phone with us, if you would identify who you are, and then we'll move forward. Good morning, Dr. Coleman. Good morning, ma'am. Okay, we'll move forward, and of course we start all of our meetings. If I can get it to, it's frozen.
Excuse me.
We'll start with the 11th commandment. The 11th commandment is, "Thou shalt not trust technology." I believe it's while Moses broke the tablets when he came down from the mountain. They wouldn't boot up for him, so he broke them. So there we go. The vision and mission of the Department of Education: create a world-class educational system that gives students knowledge and skills to be successful in college and the workforce. And the mission there. The strategic plan goals. The work of this task force, we believe, has touched on just about all of those goals, except maybe for number 3, and we are excited about those. The goals for this committee have been to determine the types and quality and amount of tests students take on the state and district level, to provide recommendations on ways to ensure student testing is streamlined, and to discover and recommend best practices for student testing on the state and district level. Expectations you see there, and I think our committee members have done a very good job of abiding and being part of those expectations. Reminders, this meeting is being live streamed, and there could be media present, so committee members here, if you have a question or whatever, make sure that you speak into the microphone so that you are heard for those that are joining us by phone or by internet. Today's agenda, we're going to have a couple of presentations being given to us this morning. First of all, we're going to have, we talked about at our last meeting, some preliminary findings from the district testing survey that was done. And this morning, Dr. Jan Lin, who is the Director of Research and Development at MDE, is going to take us through a more in-depth look at that data set that was put together. And then after her, Dr. Angela Robertson, who is the Research Professor and Associate Director at Mississippi State University, will take us through the teacher survey information that was done. Task force members, we can ask questions and things as we go through this, but please, this is not a day for us to really make final recommendations and things from this task force. We would like to try to schedule a final meeting, hopefully, next month, April the 17th. I say next month, that is fixing to be this month, April the 17th at 2 p.m., and we're hoping to be able to be joined by a national expert from the National Center on Assessment to help guide our discussion. So we will hear the presentations, ask clarifying questions today, get those points straight in our mind, go home from this, do your research, and then come back with recommendations that you would like to make, and we will have that discussion at our April meeting if that is agreeable. So at this time, we'll recognize Dr. Lin to come and lead us through presentation on analysis of the administrator and district survey on testing. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to come before you today to present the administer survey analysis results based on the data provided by the committee. The presentation will include 3 parts: survey overview, highlights of the analysis results, thank you, and recommendations for next steps. Centering around student success, both the vision and mission of MDE create an outstanding climate of support for agency researchers and enable stellar advances in research. We have 6 goals focused on reaching our vision. The 6 goals revolve around student proficiency and growth, high-quality college and career pathways, high-quality early learning, effective teaching and leading, information and educational technologies, and school improvement. All 6 goals revolve around student outcomes and student success. Although the information from state tests is already cataloged, little is known about the variation in district tests. So the planned goals of the survey were to determine the types, quality, and amount of tests students took on the district level in 17-18. According to the information obtained from last committee meeting in January, the survey was administered in October 2018 and sent to superintendents via email. This survey is composed of vendor-created assessments questions. The provided list of vendor-created assessments includes 35 different types of assessments by various test vendors. For each type of assessment, survey participants were asked a group of questions. For instance, if a survey participant selected 10 different types of vendor-created assessments administered in his or her district, then he or she had to answer the same group of questions 10 times. Among all 135 survey participants, 85% of them completed the entire questionnaire, and therefore 115 were considered survey completers. Next, using the timestamp on each response from the survey data, we calculated how much time it took each survey completers to complete the survey. We know from past experience that speeding completers who complete the survey too quickly, typically less than 30% of the median time, are unlikely to be reading or answering the questions appropriately. The same is true for flatliners, who mark each answer the same. They may have read the questions, but they don't really think about the answers. Therefore, it's best to remove speeders and flatliners from the survey data to eliminate meaningless input. After removing non-completers, speeders, flatliners, and duplicates, 96 districts are counted as valid respondents to the survey. One thing that is notable is that when we broke down the valid respondents, we found out that the response rates for D districts and F districts are distinctly different than A, B, and C districts. 46% of D districts, they didn't respond to the survey successfully. And 56% of F districts, they didn't respond to the survey successfully either. This will result in a positively skewed distribution of the dataset. Therefore, analysis conducted using this dataset will more heavily reflect the responses from A, B, and C districts regarding district testing. As we mentioned earlier, the survey provided a list of 35 vendor-created assessments and asked the participants to select all vendor-created assessments that their districts used for all students in a particular course or grade in 17-18 from the list. Among all valid survey respondents, 95% of them reported that they used at least one vendor-created assessment. in 1718. On average, a district reported using 7 different types of assessments in 1718. However, some districts reported that their district used over 13 different types of vendor-created assessments in 1718. Now let's move on to what we found. In this section, we will look at some highlights of our findings from the following angles: teachers and administrators' opinions on widely used vendor-created assessments, amount of student testing time and district administration time, top factors that affect testing amount, correlations between testing amount and district performance, and also correlations between testing amount and proficiency levels. Overall, administrators are more likely to find a vendor-created assessment very helpful than teachers. When we break down the assessments in ELA and math, we can see the comparison between teachers and administrators regarding different assessments. For vendor-created ELA assessments, on the left, both teachers and administrators find CASE ELA by TE21 most helpful. For vendor-created math assessments, on the right, iReady Math by Curriculum Associates is rated the most helpful assessment, and STAR Math by Renaissance Learning is rated at least the least helpful assessment by both teachers and administrators. However, one thing we need to notice here. This survey was distributed to districts' superintendents and completed by districts' administrators. Therefore, the responses to which degree do teachers find an assessment helpful was answered by administrators, and therefore doesn't reflect the primary opinion of teachers, only the administrators' perceptions of the teachers' opinions. There are 2 key questions included in the survey. The first question is, what is the length of one administration in minutes for a student without time accommodations? This survey question provides us information of student testing time for one administration of one assessment. From the survey data we collected, we noticed that different vendor-created assessments require different amounts of time for students to complete. And for the same assessment, different districts reported vastly different amounts of student testing time. For example, some districts reported that it takes 15 minutes for a student to complete STAR ELA by Renaissance Learning, while some other districts reported 180 minutes of student testing time on the same vendor-created assessment. The second question is, how many school days does it take the district to test all students for one administration? This provides us information of district administration time for one administration of one assessment. The range of it varies from 1 to 20 school days. However, one thing we should pay attention to: when districts report the number of school days they take to test all students for one administration, how do they measure and define their administration time in terms of school days? For instance, if District A spends 2 hours each day and 5 days to administer the test for all students, and District B spent 5 hours a day and 2 school days to administer the test for all students, then they may report different answers to the survey questions. But the actual test administration effort is theoretically the same. Another instance would be if a district administers 2 or more different types of assessment in a day, and each type of assessment takes different numbers of school days to complete, then it might be difficult to disentangle the test administration effort when calculating the total amount of time spent on test administration in a school year for all assessments. Now let's look at some common factors prolonging test administration time for individual students beyond the expected number of minutes to administer the test. As we see from the stacked bar graph here, the top two factors reported by districts administrators are technology issues with districts' broadband and internet, and technology issues with vendor software. Another two notable factors are technology issues with district hardware and students forgetting their login and passwords. Among the 8 provided factors, these 4 factors contributed 75 to 90% to the prolonging of test administration for individual students beyond the expected number of minutes required to administer the test. So this shows us how critical the role that technology plays in impacting the test administration time for districts. In terms of district administration time testing all students, shortage of test-capable devices was reported as the major factor that caused the districts taking a longer time to test all students. Technology issues with the district broadband and internet contributed significantly to the cause of districts taking longer to test all students as well. These 2 factors in total contributed 80 to 85% of the issues leading to the prolonging of the number of days required to administer the test. There is another key question included in the survey, which is how frequently does the district administer the test in terms of the number of years, in terms of the number of times per year. This provides the frequency of test administration for one assessment in 1718. From the reported data, one vendor-created assessment, Star by Renaissance Learning, was administered up to 11 times at some districts in 1718. And another assessment, Case by TE21, was administered between 1 to 4 times. Combining the information we obtained, sure.
That minimum and maximum numbers there, the minimum number and maximum.
Sure. On the left in the bracket is the minimum. Right. Correct. Combining the information we obtain on student testing time and district administration time for one administration of one assessment with the frequency of test administration for one assessment, we can estimate 2 things. Number 1 is student total testing time for all vendor-created assessment in 1718, and the second one is district total administration time for all vendor-created assessment in 1718. Here is a formula of it. So in 1718, the estimated individual student total testing time for all vendor-created assessments is equal to the sum of student testing time for one administration of each assessment times its associated frequency of administration. Applying the same logic here, the estimated district total administration time for all vendor-created assessments is equal to the sum of district administration time for one administration of each assessment times its associated frequency. With the calculated student total testing time for all vendor-created assessments and district total administration time for all vendor-created assessments in 1718, we linked these 2 pieces of information to districts' accountability results and their ELA and math proficiency levels. First of all, we linked individual student total testing time in 1718 at each school district to its accountability result. We found out that students from F districts, on average, spent the longest time on vendor-created assessments compared to students from other districts. Interestingly, students from A districts, on average, spend more testing time on vendor-created assessments than students from B, C, and D districts. The correlation between the average of students' total testing time and district's performance here shows is negative 0.14. Correlation measures whether and how two factors are related, and it ranges from -1 to +1. The closer the number to -1 or +1, the more closely the two factors are related. If the correlation is close to 0, it means there's no relationship between the two factors. Therefore, based on our number here, negative 0.14, there's no significant correlation between student testing time and district's performance. Second, we linked the district administration time in 1718 at each district to its accountability result. We found out that A and F districts whose students spend more time on vendor-created assessments are actually not the districts whose test administration time are longer. Instead, administrators at C districts and D districts spend significantly more time than other districts administering vendor-created assessments. The correlation between district administration time and district's performance is not strong, and we can tell it's negative 0.11. Next, we linked the student total testing time and district total administration time on ELA assessments to the district's ELA proficiency level. From the scatter plots, although a negative correlation is found, we don't see that either student's testing time or district administration time spent on ELA assessments has a strong correlation with that district's ELA proficiency, which means if a district whose students spend more testing time on vendor-created assessments, ELA assessments, than other districts, we cannot deduce that the district will have a significantly lower ELA proficiency. By applying the same logic, if a district spends more administration time on vendor-created reading assessments than others, the district's ELA proficiency won't be necessarily lower.
Really, that reaffirms what we kind of already know, I think, as practitioners, that there's nothing magical about just giving a benchmark assessment. It's what you do with the results that matters, but just giving it does not move the needle one way or the other. So,
correct. Last, we linked the student total testing time and district total administration time on math assessments to that district's math proficiency level. From the scatter plot above, as found in the results from ELA assessments, we see that neither students' testing time nor district's administration time spent on math assessments has a strong correlation with the district's math proficiency. As we know, correlation doesn't mean causation. Correlation can hint at tendencies, but there are no hard and fact conclusions reliably drawn from correlations without further research. Causal relationship between test amount and district performance should be investigated by using regressional approaches. From evaluating the survey questions and analyzing the survey data, here are a few recommendations and next steps can be considered. First, an enhanced survey mechanism is needed. Based on the final thoughts and comments provided by respondents, the survey mechanism should allow survey participants go back and forth during the survey to change their answers. This will potentially increase the survey response rate and improve the information accuracy and data quality. Second, we should define testing effort more clearly and rigorously, especially when we design the survey questionnaire and convey the information to districts. It will be a good idea to have a matrix developed with the key parameters defined. What does each parameter mean? How does each parameter use under different conditions? And from whom should we use as primary source to collect those parameters? And how to interpret each parameter in the most accurate format. Last, for any future research, more qualitative data and more aggregate level survey questions are needed. More qualitative data provides information on opinions, attitudes, views, beliefs, and preferences, and can ensure questions about experience, meaning, and perspective being answered. More aggregate level survey questions can help us establish a broader view of the bigger picture and can also be used as a benchmark for us.
Task force members, any questions, clarifying comments? Those of us joining us by phone, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
From my personal perspective, I would consider two things. The first thing is the timeline of this project. And the second thing would be, I think it would be a good idea to reach out to the non-respondents, especially the non-respondents from D districts and F districts, and really to do a segment of the analysis based on their response, and then compare their response results with the data we have already have, and see if there is any consistent or inconsistent results.
Rachel, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Anyone else?
I have a question. I wonder if the data that we've collected would allow us to determine the impact of our processes on student performance, or if we needed to ask, some different questions to maybe determine that, if that's possible.
Before I answer,
we have some questions regarding technology, and then the amount of testing, by low performing districts and versus others, and so I just wonder if we just with the data that we have, if we're able to determine anything from that along those lines.
I think that's a great question. And if I'm going to add another few pieces into this process, what I will do is to add more qualitative questions about their overall opinions, attitudes, perspectives, instead of a more detailed disaggregate level on their, their factors on each single different vendor assessment. And the second thing I would do is to really redefine the definition of testing effort and really convey that message to districts in a clearer way.
How the technology issues expressed here can have an impact, because look at the administrators feel like these vendor created assessments are more helpful. Well, the teachers are in the classrooms dealing with the technology issues, while the administrators are not dealing with all they hear. So I can see how the technology has a negative impact on teachers' perceptions of the vendor created. So that was one thing, and then I also can see how the technology issues could also have an impact on the time and the frequency of the assessments, because when technology doesn't work, whether it be broadband access or from the school level or the vendor level, that's going to increase the testing time. Sometimes you have to shut down and come back the next day, which increases the number of days tested. So I can see where the technology, especially with the more online testing that we do from the state and from vendor created, technology could have an impact on just about every aspect of the survey.
Right, and that includes the number of devices.
Right. Correct.
Attitude or the need to, some people
Towards the assessments themselves too.
right, and the frequency involving the need to give students the opportunity to practice for what they're going to do on the actual state assessment.
I think Dr. Robertson coming up next, I think we gave the teachers in their survey, we gave them quite a few qualitative opportunities, and we have quite a bit of data that will be shared with you in a second. On this first survey with district level, we did not have many qualitative components. And so it would be interesting to go back and maybe add those qualitative components and let district administrators, school administrators answer, and then compare those two data sets to see, because I can tell you there's a difference of opinion. I know that in my own district between administrators and district level people and what teachers think. And I think that's the crux of the frustration that teachers feel, is that they feel one way, and somewhere I don't think either side is correct. The truth probably lies in between those two points of view.
I agree.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Lee. This is very, very helpful, and thank you for your time and efforts in doing this. Next, we have Dr. Angela Robertson, who's going to lead us through the teacher survey that has been conducted, and we've been anxiously awaiting those results, and we appreciate Mississippi State University and their help in facilitating the survey and compiling the data. Dr. Robertson?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and present in person instead of being on the phone. All right. I just, when this task force was formed, this quote from Dr. Wright was in the announcement. This was in the press release when she formed this task force. So I just think it's very interesting, and that's why I put it up there. So we've heard concerns from parents, lawmakers, and educators about the amount of testing on the state and district level and the time spent on test preparation. So from the very beginning, part of the formation of the task force was to address some of these concerns. And so I titled it "Let the Teacher Speak" because it came across loud and clear to me just how passionate teachers are about this subject. So I wanted to explain our survey methods first, so that you understand we tried to do as scientifically valid survey as possible. And we were hired to conduct a web-based survey of all public school teachers. Now, normally, when you're talking about over 30,000 teachers, normally what you do is take a sample and you try to come up with a representative sample. But the feeling was among this task force that you wanted to give all teachers who were interested in speaking up the opportunity. So that was the first thing when we saw that there was the potential for 32,000 respondents. Again, the normal way that we would have, our survey research lab would have done a survey is that we would have directly sent the emails. We would have gotten all of the surveys, directly sent the email, and then that way we could actually track response rates. We would know who responded and who didn't from which district, but that was not possible. So the survey was actually sent to the listserv of the superintendents, who in turn was supposed to pass it on down. So this process ended up with significant delays in getting what we're calling the recruitment email, the email that explained the survey, that explained the purpose of the survey, that provided that link to the web survey. So it did delay things, and we feel like likely impacted the rate. So I'm not going to read all this, but this is just, again, detailing how we went about the process, some of the issues that came up. For example, one of the things that was just totally unexpected was that some school-level IT systems deactivated the link. So even when it was sent to, we don't know why that happened or how it happened, but maybe it was part of spam or trying to protect the system. You know, we sometimes there's unintended consequences. But so in some cases, even though it was sent to teachers, they couldn't access. So anyway, we also, because of these delays, our original plan was to invite teachers up to 3 times. That's usually the process, to give respondents opportunities to remind them, but we were not able to do that because we were running out of time. So we only sent 2 emails out to superintendents. All right, so the overall response rate. So we had over 10,106 teachers responded out of 31,250, so 52. So the overall response rate was 32, which looks, again, from a survey, from a researcher perspective, it looks awful, but it's not when you think about how many surveys we got. The other thing I want to point out is that's the range. So we had districts with 0, but we also had districts with almost 90%. You just don't see that. So this was an eye-opening experience for me, and so I feel like, even so, I think that the results that I'm gonna present, I think should be very useful and probably representative if we were able to get everybody to participate. So as you can see, there were about 15 school districts that we got 0 response rate, not 1 teacher, and I think that may have to do with, you know, technical problems and or superintendents just not forwarding it. And then there was 30 school districts where there were less than 10%. So we ended up with a range from 1 teacher to up to 143. And some of these school districts don't have a lot of teachers, so. All right. Let's talk about the survey respondents. We had basically two target groups and slightly different sets of questions depending on whether the teacher taught a tested subject or not. Okay, so you can see that we had almost 4,000 teachers who teach a tested subject and a little over 6,000 that do not. We also we asked about what grades these teachers teach, and you can see that, again, it's quite representative. We even had teachers who teach what's considered a non-graded subject, like, would that be art, music? Yeah. So we had the gamut, the whole range. We also had years of experience, and you can see we have there's about 5% who only taught for a year or less, and then we also had quite a few teachers who've been teaching for more than 20 years. So you've got some very dedicated teachers who, regardless of the pay, I know there's a lot of in the media right now about the legislature's pay raise for teachers, but you've got a lot of teachers who've been teaching 30 years and more. So let's start with the tested subject teachers, and these are the subjects that are the tested subjects. Okay, so just to show you, when they told us which subjects they taught, that's how they got lumped into this group, and if they didn't mark these, they got lumped in the other group. Okay, thinking about state level testing, would you say that the amount of testing is, and as you can see overall, the majority of teachers say it's too much, okay?
Now this results here, this is just from those teachers that teach a tested subject.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So this is the almost 4,000 that say they teach, regardless of grade level or school, whether it's primary, middle, or, So, yes. So the overall rate was 76.5% too much. Now, then I looked at it by teaching experience. And what you'll find is when you compare teachers with the newbie teachers with 1 year or less, 65% of them said too much. So even the newbie teachers said it's too much. But teachers with greater experience, more than a year, they also said too much. So it ranged anywhere from 75 to 78%. When you looked at what I'm calling school level, so high school teachers were the most likely to say too much, 85%, compared to middle school teachers, 70%, and primary, 71%. And no, I'm sorry. Let me back up. No, this is everybody. I'm sorry. This is everybody. I have some other questions. So this questions was asked of everybody, all 10,000. I apologize. So then when you compare the tested subject teachers, they were less likely to say too much compared to the non-tested. So if they were a tested subject teacher, that's 70%, and the non-tested subject teachers were 80.5. So even if you're not teaching a subject that's tested, it's still impacting you. So, I mean, that's the way I interpret that. That they're still being impacted by all the testing that's going on. Okay. Now we ask the same again. This is from everyone, and it's not quite as high as the state level testing. This is the district level, but the exact same question. So if you go back, overall rate was 76 for state level. It's a little bit lower, but it's still the vast majority. So about 70% are saying too much. And then again, we find that the newest teachers, the newbie teachers, it's just over half are saying too much compared to the more experienced teachers. Same thing, but here, this is interesting. This is actually the opposite of what we saw for state level testing. So high school teachers were less likely to say too much than middle and primary. And there was no difference between tested subject teachers and non-tested subject teachers related to too much. Instead, where they differed was when you're looking at just right. The tested subject teachers were were more likely, 26 versus 24, and they were less likely to say don't know. Okay. Again, pretty clear that everybody thinks there's too much testing. All right. So findings from the tested, now from here on, I'm looking at tested subject teachers. So they were asked, what are the reasons for using assessments? And you can see here's the percentages, progress monitoring test and benchmark is 83.5%. So again, the vast majority say they use assessments for progress monitoring. Again, we're still over half when we're looking at diagnostic or part of the student's grades. Less likely, but still close to half, summative or post-test, and a little over a third for 9 weeks testing. All right, again, we're only talking about tested subject teachers. Purpose of the assessment. Right up at the top, enable teachers to make instructional decisions. So again, we're not saying that assessments are not useful. Okay, we're not saying that. They say they're useful for certain purposes, but what y'all may need to consider is how much or maybe which assessments get the job done, and do you need to do so many, maybe. Also way up there, enable teachers and administrators to predict student achievement, enable teachers, administrators to determine skill or standard mastery, and then it goes on down. Not many teachers see assessments as motivating students. They don't see that as happening. All right.
But those top three are interesting. Those top three are exactly what you would think the assessment should be used for. Right. So that's interesting to see that teachers do see that value, even though they overwhelmingly think there's too much of it taking place. It's almost like, I don't like doing something. I don't like being on a diet, but I do see the results when I do what I'm supposed to do and the positive results. I still don't like it, but I need to do it. So there's a component there that it is useful, while we do need to look at the amount.
Okay, now here is let me also point out there was some overlap in the questions given to the teachers and the questions given to the superintendents or the administrators. Okay, so here is that helpfulness question. And as you saw before, while Dr. Lee, am I pronouncing Lee? She was showing a comparison between superintendents and teachers, but it really wasn't the teachers. It was the administrators' perceptions of what they thought. Here's what teachers really think, okay? Now, the other thing that's different about this survey, and this was a decision made by this body, originally we were going to, y'all wanted to do the same thing. Have them pick from a list of 35 assessments, and then if they said, yes, we do this assessment, then they were going to answer all these questions about that assessment. And I pointed out at an earlier meeting that, and you saw, some of these districts might administer, they might have lots of assessments. So it would greatly extend the length of time, because every time, if she marked 5, she's got to answer the same set of questions 5 times. So the decision to keep the survey to 20 minutes or less, and actually it was a bit shorter than that, we ask about in general. So the question is not asking about a specific assessment like was done for the superintendents. It was asking about assessments in general, okay? So there may be, if we had asked the question differently, they may have said, well, this assessment is very helpful compared to this assessment, but we were asking in general. And as you can see, just a bit over a quarter said very helpful. So the modal response is somewhat, okay? So when you're lumping all of the assessments, it's somewhat. And again, we're finding differences between teachers, okay? So the very helpful, which I believe was presented in the earlier presentation. So if you look at that, the newbie teachers are more likely to say it's very helpful compared to teachers with greater experience. And again, this question was only asked of teachers that teach tested subjects. High school teachers were less likely to say very helpful compared to middle and primary school teachers. All right. Here's some of the reasons, some of the challenges. And again, this was the way that the wording was provided to them. And the percentages on the side may be a little bit confusing, so I will let me just explain. The way it was set up for each one of these questions, considering the challenges, they were asked to rank order. So time taken away from daily instruction, they were given a choice of a 1 to 5 response, okay? Stress, and so on and so forth. So basically, what I did was look at for each one of these, which one had the highest percentage, ranking it in that way. Does that make sense? So if you think about it that way, and if I need to, I can go back and look at it another way. But in other words, time taken away from daily instruction was the most frequently rated number 1 among teachers. Now, while I put stress for teachers and students and student motivation engagement as 2 and 3, the reality is they're tied. I mean, it's not a statistical significantly different. So they're tied for second place. Technology issues was ranked 4th, and adequate resources, like I said, the most teachers put that 5th. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. All right. We also asked teachers about the length in minutes. And again, this was just for the average administration of a typical assessment. So it's not really going to map on to what you asked the superintendents because it was assessment specific. But we did ask about that, the length in minutes for the average administration of a typical, how many school days it took to test all of his or her students for one administration, again, of a typical, and how many school days it took to receive the results for all the students who were tested. Now, what I decided to do was to limit this because we did have, like I said, there were schools where there was no response, so there was no point in using those. But we also had schools where there was 1 or 2 or 3 teachers. So I just didn't feel like the results would be useful for so few teachers because it might be that she taught one kind of test and she taught one subject and so it wouldn't be represented. So basically I limited this analysis to only those school districts that had a response rate of 10% or higher. So it's not all of the school districts. Now, I'm not in your packet, okay? I don't have it on here because it's several pages long, but it's in your packet if you just look at that. So I apologize. I apologize to the folks that are on the call, but I believe you did receive the handouts. They were emailed. Okay, so you should have gotten. Oh no, nope, it's not in there. I have handouts. Which one are you looking for? I'm looking for the one that had. Here, it's on the other side. Okay, scared me there a minute. All right. Okay, so what you're going to find is this very detailed, and I'm sorry, I'm an academic, I'm a researcher, so it's a lot of information, and there's no way I can go over this, and y'all really need to take the time to study it, and then send me, send me your questions, email me, and I'll, but let me just, so basically you have every school district listed by name, again, those that I had a 10% or higher response rate. The first column is the average length of test administration in minutes. The mean is the average score, but I've also put the range so that you can see the range. The average number of days, again, the mean and the standard deviation. It's just showing you the average, and then I have the range, and that's in days, and then the last one is the average number of days to receive the assessment results. And the reason you have 0 is because some of these computer administered assessments, you immediately get the results as soon as the student is finished. So the 0 really is indicating that it's same day. Okay. All right. So you can see. So let me just say, there is a statistically significant difference between school districts. Okay, that's the bottom line. And just by eyeballing it, you can look and see that it can range from number of minutes can range from 65 minutes to 300. You know, or number of days can range from 1 to 20. Number of days to receive the results can range from same day to 90. So quite a difference, and it varies considerably by the school district. So you know, that's something that y'all just need to think about. And I was not asked to look at, nor did I know about A through F level schools. If y'all want to provide me with the information, I can reorganize that table that way. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice the data, just bottom line, and you can just see by eyeballing it. You don't need a statistical test to tell you there's a lot of difference between school districts. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So on the average number of days to receive the assessment results, the range, the highest I see is 90. Was that like the top choice, or was there one that was higher?
Well, okay. I made a decision as a researcher to cap it at 90. There were some responses that were just, there's no way they could have been valid, like 1,000 days. So I looked at well, I mean, it just, and I'm not my area is, I'm a sociologist. I'm don't have training in education, but you know, in talking to people that know something about testing, it just seemed, and also kind of looking at the, you know, the range and standard deviation, that sort of thing. Anything above 90 was so far out of what seemed to be realistic that I just capped those at 90. But I can provide the total range if you want.
I think 90. If it's above, you know, and I really, I wonder if it was a misunderstanding of what that really meant, because I find it hard to believe that there are, you know, any district that gives assessments, whatever, that doesn't provide the results within 90 days. I mean, right, unless they just were not giving the results at all to their teachers, which that could happen. That it's received at the district level and the school level, but never gets down to the teacher level. Committee members, would it be useful or helpful for these results here to be disaggregated by accountability levels? I don't know that would be significant. I think because we're not talking about making decisions based on accountability levels. We're talking about recommendations in general for all teachers, and that's just my opinion. But yeah, they know what if a practitioner sees this, they know what level they are and what that means. So okay.
All right. So again, this is from tested subject teachers. And I think what's interesting is there is some dovetail in reasons for prolonged test administration. So the teachers are also saying technology is a problem, okay? Either issues with the district broadband or internet, vendor software, and then it goes all the way down. You'll notice it's not a big problem, but some issues related to student behavior and students forgetting their login or identification, and having to collect cell phones, which I would suspect would be high school students, but middle schools too? Oh, wow. Okay. So, but technology is definitely an issue that's prolonging test administration. So in that sense, teachers and school administrators are on the same page. All right, so now let's look at the non-tested. We didn't ask them quite as many questions, but they had something to say too. So they were asked if they were provided the results. So even though they do not teach a tested subject, and 76% said yes, that they were provided the results.
That's promising. That's good.
Well, I think so too. And then they were also asked, what are the primary ways that you use these results? And they are saying the same thing that the tested subject teachers, to make instructional decisions. Very few, almost none, said to assign grades. So these other things are less likely, but that top one, to make instructional decisions, I think is important. And a small percentage said, I do not use the results provided, which I don't know what that means. But all right, let me get to qualitative. Let me just, again, this was, I've done qualitative research before. Let me just tell you, usually you'll do a focus group. You might have 12 people. A large focus group would be more than that. Or I might do a survey. I'm more of a quantitative researcher than qualitative, but I recognize the value. It's very important because sometimes those fixed choice questions just don't get at the issue. So, to allow the student, both sets of teachers, there was a question, do you have any other concerns you want to share? Okay. And who would have thought? Who would have thought? Yes, they did. 2,200 teachers. That was 22% of all survey respondents wrote something in a text box. And let me just tell you, it wasn't a word or a phrase. We had teachers writing complete sentences and whole paragraphs, okay? And we are still coding this. I mean, like I said, I have never in my 25 years of doing research had this many responses. So I do want you to tell you again, we are taking a very scientific approach to the qualitative research. So we developed a coding scheme. We have 4 people trained. Some are undergraduate, some are graduate and research associates. But we developed a coding scheme. We trained everybody. We made sure that we had inter-rater reliability. So we tested that. Now, all that will be in this report that I'll give you. But I just want you to know that we were very methodical and scientific about making sure. And we haven't finished. I mean, we've got the first 1,000 done, and we're still going through this process. So at least 2 people read every single message, what was written, and placed it in one of 15 different categories. So you also have that. You also have a handout. And again, I'm not putting that on the screen, but you do have a handout that has the short theme, if you will, a definition of the theme. And so I'm going to show you, these are the top 5 themes, okay? And
Dr. Robertson, let me applaud you and your staff. This was one of the main things that we wanted to come out of this, was that teachers' voices were heard. And so you and your staff doing this, I hope that any teachers listening or whatever will understand that your voice is being considered and is being heard. So I applaud you and your staff for doing that.
Okay, so again, you can see these are the top 5 based on the frequency that my crew came up with coding these passages. And I also want to point out that many times when teachers wrote whole paragraphs, there was more than one theme. So we're counting, was this theme, did it come up in the passage? So too much testing, and again, it refers to the amount of testing, the length of testing, and general complaints about how much testing occurs. The second one, and this was not in any of the quantitative questions, was what we're calling bad test or bad data. And so basically what we're talking about here is the quality of the test and whether it fits with the curriculum, the evaluative ability of the test or its developmentally appropriateness. How good, basically some teachers were saying it's not a good fit. Well, in particular, it's not a good fit for children with disabilities or in special education programs. So again, I think the selection of the test of these assessments are important. Third on the list was kid stress, that students are feeling pressure and it's resulting in poor physical and mental health. And also some teachers feel like it's leading to students disliking school. Loss of instructional time, that came up in some of the structure questions. And then teacher stress. So these are the top 5, but as you can see, there's in the handout that I gave you, there's a lot more codes that we came up with. And I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to put them in here. But again, just to show you, just to give you a flavor of these, how teachers feel about this. They took the time to write paragraphs. And you can see from this one right here, this person is both a parent and a teacher and talking about, here's that stress. So there's a theme right there, 2 themes, stress on teachers and students. Talking about, I feel like pulling them out of school. I feel like we spend all of our time ramming information down their throats instead of focusing on developmentally appropriate concepts. And then, so you can, and she's talking about, I'm assuming it's a she, kindergarten student. So there's one quote. Let me just, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. When we provide you with the report, it's going to end up being a very long document because we're going to have, for every one of these 15 codes, we're going to provide a sampling of what teachers had to say. So there's a lot of information packed in here. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just point out a couple of them. Seeing the level of motivation among students decline rapidly. Education should affect the whole child. Again, talking about, I understand that it's needed, it's important, but in this case, testing elementary and middle school students so many days per year is unnecessary and does not benefit. Here's another one. Too much stress on testing. We rush through skills just to cover them for the test. Testing some skills too early. So again, this idea about sometimes testing is just not appropriate for your goal, what you're trying to accomplish. I feel guilty. All right, I believe testing and the stress it's causing is a big reason we're seeing teachers leaving education. And one more, extremely high amount of teacher morale and motivation suffers. No longer allowed to teach what they're most passionate about, required to teach specific curriculum. So there's a lot more of this where it came from, and y'all will be y'all will be getting it, but we will also, in the final report that you get, we'll be trying to digest and synthesize some of this for you so that you don't have to read 2,000 documents. So in summary, I feel like teachers were very responsive to the opportunity to share their perspectives. No doubt that they feel that there's too much testing at both the state and district level. The biggest challenge, or ranked first, is that it takes away from daily instruction. It's also stressing out teachers and students. And as I mentioned, there are significant differences between districts, and technology issues seems to be the primary reason for prolonged test administration. So I will be happy to entertain any other questions, and Patrice has my email. I can also give it to you, so if anybody wants to email me with other questions, I am available to talk with you.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Any questions? Any people, any task force members by phone or in person, anyone have any questions or clarifying comments?
All right. Thank you.
I think next steps, we've got a lot of information and data. Ms. Guilfoyle, the documents that we received that were not, the task force members say they didn't receive that information.
Have received an email with all the documents.
Okay.
That are in the packets.
It's
here
in the packet.
Today.
Okay.
Yes.
I know that I received the PowerPoints, but I didn't know if they received these information as well. Okay.
I sent everything this morning to all.
Okay. So what we had asked task force members to do is to take time, really be diligent in this, take time to study through, come prepared. We would like to have our next meeting on April the 17th at 2 p.m., not in the morning, and we need to have the time right. I was early this morning and got here thinking we were meeting at 9 o'clock, and we didn't start until 10, but we'll meet at 2 p.m. on April the 17th, and hopefully at that time, if you will bring, if task force members will bring some concrete suggestions and recommendations with you for how we can tackle some of the issues that have come up in the data, both from districts and from the teachers. Are there any final questions or comments? Again, thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you, Dr. Robertson, for your diligent work in helping us provide this. Then we will conclude. Thank you.